come to Canada. When US networks come into Canada, they, the CRTC, which is our governing body over all film work that happens in radio and different things that happen, they insist that they invest in Canada's, and they stipulate in which way. So I've actually met with the CRT a couple of different times trying to push them to stipulate that they hire Indigenous. And I had a deal with NBC for a long time, and they were mentoring some of my Indigenous students. That sort of thing should be happening all across Canada. And we should be fighting for those kind of things all the time, constantly. And unfortunately, we are, a lot of us. But I think it's an example of, and I don't know what's going on in the States, but if that sort of thing isn't happening in the States, that's a sort of thing that has to also happen there. And we need to find a way to make it so that border doesn't really exist in the film industry. Because, you know, when I was traveling around in the festivals in the States, Native Americans would come up to me all the time and say, you know, that they don't get the kind of funding we get in Canada. Is there a way to share? Is there a way to partner? And there isn't really, because the country we build these co-productions with has to have money. So that's why we're co-producing with New Zealand or Norway or different countries like that, because they can offer money into the pot. So, you know, I've been talking to the ISO with Jesse Wente about that kind of an issue, and he's working out a plan and a thought around that issue. But that's another thing that we did in Canada was years and years of work went into developing the Indigenous Screen Office, and now they have funding to help develop Indigenous specific programming. But I think we're left out. If we were included, I wouldn't be fighting so hard. I wouldn't be working so hard. But I'm just constantly working. It's all I do. It's all I think about. I eat, sleep, and dream this kind of work. And but you know, my dad used to say that there hasn't been a battle in this world that hasn't been didn't pay the price of blood, sweat, and tears. And so that's what I go into it with. But that's what I have to say about that for now. Thanks very much for listening.
Okay.
So what do you think, folks from the US, how do you see that as, there's obviously a separation by the border. And I know that each each government takes a different tact, although they do take a lot of the same tacts when dealing with Native Americans. But how do you think the US film industry compares?
Well, if you want me to jump in, yeah, Joseph Herb here. Yeah, we don't have the same kind of funding or outlets that the Northern Indigenous groups have in Canada. And it's kind of problematic. You know, we don't have as many, you know, we have this few film festivals and stuff, and we've, you know, things like what you were talking about earlier with Sterling or Sierra, you know, with some of these bigger networks finally picking up some shows where the creators are Indigenous, which is just recent, actually. You know, it's just this last year. We certainly need a lot more of that. We don't have funding in the same kind of ways. We don't have training in the same ways, and we don't have the, once you get someone with some skill sets, trying to keep them working is quite difficult. And we have the same things that they were talking about with, once you get someone trained, keeping them with consistent work so that they stay in the industry is quite difficult. And that's something I think we do share with that, but we certainly are less funded in a lot of ways. But I certainly don't want to, what's our other United States Indigenous participant think about that?
That would be you, Chris.
Well, I'm certainly not in
Hollywood or big production wise. I'm pretty small time as it is, but it's just something you don't see a whole lot of, native led productions, native starring vehicles, and just you don't see a whole lot of that around here, or I haven't seen it until very recently. And one of the big ones for me was Smoke Signals back in 1998. I was 12 years old. My family was really big into movies back then. I can remember my dad taking me to see Terminator 2 in the theater. And gosh, I was so young. At the beginning, that skull comes out of the flames to this into the movie, into the screen, and I started crying really loud. And he took me out into the lobby. So I was a little early in my age range to be seeing something like that, maybe, but it really stuck with me. So back to Smoke Signals, it was my first time seeing native people on the big screen. My dad took us all out to see it, and we were the only ones in the movie theater, and that kind of stuck with me since then. Hey, I kind of want to do this. I can do this. That movie made me feel like I could grab some friends and a couple of cameras and go out and make a movie. So, but to answer your question, I don't see a whole lot of indigenous led productions until pretty recent.
Anybody else have anything to add to our, I think we're all in agreement here. Our indigenous film
One of the things
overlook.
that I also do is, and I do this off the corner of my desk, is I have a little unofficial database of crew from all across Canada. And I do have non-Indigenous and Indigenous people, producers contacting me on a regular basis looking for crew. And I keep an eye on Facebook too. I don't have a social life. I'm kind of pitiful that way. I I watch Facebook all the time, and if I see there's all these different pages where people look for crew, and I keep an eye on that. And I'm always recommending Indigenous crew. And I have, like Disney contacted me and said, they wanted Indigenous crew, and so did the Ryan Reynolds thing. And I really try hard to, I'll notice on Facebook when I see an Indigenous person who's a sound recordist or something that weren't trained with me, but I can see them out there working in the industry. I'll get a hold of them and I'll say, hey, can I add you to my list, to my roster? And I include them in there, and that way I can start, getting them out there, getting them experience, getting them paychecks, trying to keep them in the industry. I think that, that inclusion rider is something that I've been trying to spin a little bit, but I was told from some Native Americans that it doesn't actually work, but we're still trying to spin it in Canada to see if we can't pressure people into demanding that Indigenous people be on sets. And I'm also fighting for an Indigenous tax credit. So I don't know what the tax situation is in the United States, but in Canada, there's these tax credits, and they account for somewhere in the 33% of your budget. And there's a couple of big problems that happen. And one is that you don't get that money until after the show has been finished. And then, but you need it for production. So then you have to take out a big loan from somewhere, and Indigenous people are discriminated against in banks. So they often have to get a non-Indigenous producer to go in and get that loan for them to be able to finish their film. So what I'm fighting with is a couple of different things. And the ISO, the Indigenous Screen Office, is taking it one approach, and I'm taking another approach. And together we're kind of just trying to make a difference. I'm getting a little bit of traction in British Columbia, creating a BC Indigenous tax credit. Because I think if I win in British Columbia, then we can make an argument in every province across Canada. And then we can go after a federal one. So, and then what the ISO is saying is, okay, what if you don't hang on? They're saying to the government, what if you don't hang on to the tax credit for Indigenous people? You release it immediately. I love that idea. So I'm starting to incorporate that into my lobbying, because sometimes when you're lobbying for something, whoever you're lobbying will say, no, we don't like that idea. But if you pull another idea out your back pocket and go, well, what about this one? Well, what about this one? What about this one? Until they finally take some traction and they finally give in. I mean, I have people give in to me just because they're sick and tired of listening to me. that happens all the time, which is great because I love to talk. I think that, you know, we just can't let up. You know, when you look at our history, when people say, well, you had the same advantages as us. No, we actually didn't. We were confined by law on the reservation. When I teach history, I have a huge diagram I developed, and I show Indigenous history, you know, the past system, the laws that confined us on reservation, residential schools. I list our history, and then I list Canada's history, and then I list Canada's and United States film history. And you see the film history starting in the late 1800s, and us not getting involved until around 1960, in the 60s when the National Film Board started the Indigenous film crew, and but that was just a little drop. But then you see, you know, the odd person like getting into the industry, Chief Dan George, Silver Heels, different people like that who made a splash out there. You see a little bit of that happening, but we really didn't get in, you know, until in Canada, until the Northern Broadcast turned into the APTN, the Aboriginal People's Broadcasting Network. And even then, when you look at how many Indigenous people actually work for APTN, there's, you know, we're not the majority. And so there's obviously a lot of work, continuous, constant work to be done. And this is the way I voice myself when I'm talking in public to non-Indigenous people. We were disadvantaged because of the way we were treated, the racism and the prejudice that we face. Our people were being murdered and slaughtered. How are we supposed to participate? So I make sure that they are starting their thinking process, understanding why we are where we are and what debt they owe us to equal that playing field.
Well, I see a lot of, you mentioned J.C. Overhills and Chief Dan George. In the United States, I know that in the silent era, in the early 1900s and 1800s, there are a lot of Indigenous directors at the time, but they just sort of fell out of favor, as they typically do. Now I had a question going and I forgot what the question was. What is sort of like, maybe we can hear from April and Shelley as well. What sort of like is the prevailing attitudes towards natives in the industry? I know we're probably all in agreement on what it is, but I'd like to hear what, even if some of you have some experiences on that.
Ernest, can I take that one?
We're restricting this to the panel.
Okay, no worries.
Oh,
Well,
I can talk about that a little bit. Just recently, they're starting to have more and more Indigenous offices opening up for people to submit their proposals when the call for projects goes out. So that means there's more competition. I think too, what really kind of bothers me is when, say, the US says to Canadian natives, well, you guys get you get funding for your film. It's like, yeah, we do, but we have to fight for it too. We just don't have it handed to us. So we have to really make sure that we've covered all our grounds in getting the proposal out there, you know, making sure we've done what we have to do. But I really can't answer that because, you know, I live in Brantford, not Toronto. If I lived in Toronto, it'd be a different story because then you meet people and you have an advantage to go and see these people. But I think that it's just a matter of work. Just put in your work, your time, and you know, make sure you're not leaving stuff out of those proposals. I don't know. I can't really answer that question because I'm just kind of not in the, I don't go to parties. So I don't know. But I keep trying.
Well, I sort of, I feel bad because I stopped applying for the grants after a while. I applied for a few over the years and I was very upset. One, you wait 6 months to have a no, it's like, I took a documentary in my Holders of the Crown documentary, and I'm trying to get funding to do that. And they didn't like the topic or something. And I was really upset. It's like, I thought it was a very important topic, right? It's like, we're looking at Supreme Court cases, Atlantic Canada, And after waiting around for 6 months, they tell you no. And so that's just too disheartening to put all your work in these little proposals. And then you see all the people that get these grants and it's like, well, who the hell are these people? That to me was very hard. I have no idea who they are. So I kind of thought like, okay, we have, at least people, other filmmakers that you might know, right? So I kind of stopped applying. So I feel bad. And Doreen's up there working working really hard to make these connections. And I'd say, forget it. I'll just make it myself. That's like you're saying, why not make it yourself? I was upset that they wanted permission, or they were giving us permission to make our films. And it's like, well, who the hell are you guys? You just give us the money. Let's not do that. I'm pretty, so that's where I am in funding.
I think you got to reapply. Yeah, you have to.
All done. My film's all done for now. It's like,
Oh, well, that's good.
yeah, it's like, I'll just do it. When I start my project, I don't think I'm going to have money for them, just so I'm not let down, but would have been nice.
My last film, I kind of did, well, the Union of BC and Cheese gave me $18,000, which is next to nothing for a feature documentary, especially of that level, because it was a lot of research that had to go into it. We're talking about it was all based on the white paper, which happened in 1969. There's a lot of research just finding the people who existed back then, who are not alive today, and then finding all the photographs and everything. And the interviews, I had to travel to get the interviews done, and it's a lot of work. I wound up having to fund the end of that myself because that 18,000 was spent in production. I mean, just barely covered production. I find that because I'm so vocal, I'm a little bit not liked by the people I'm constantly attacking, which is the white people with the money. So when they say no, I am not surprised. And I kind of go into it expecting to hear no. So I don't actually apply very often either because I'm probably going to get a no anyways. But I encourage you to keep applying because things are changing. We're getting more and more Indigenous people. We're guilting them into having Indigenous juries. And that's what's making the difference, with telefilm. And we're making a lot of headway with a lot of the funds. And you have to apply because there has to be representation. Otherwise they say, oh, well, they're what? Well, I want to give you the Canada Media Fund as an example. I was on the jury this year and we didn't barely get enough applicants. Everybody got funded except one project. So if you had applied, you would have got it. Yeah. That's the situation it was in because there's too many people saying what you're saying. I got tired of applying. And then our funds are going to get smaller and smaller because there's not going to be enough people applying for the funds. If the fund isn't working, we have to change it. Like if Canada Arts Council funding is not working for us, we have to fight them and make them change the way they give the funding out so that it does work for us. I mean, we have to identify what the problems are with it and make it better.
Yep. And
in the States, I was really impressed with, I saw this one film at, I can't pronounce his name, Rod, and his last name starts with a P. He's a director. He made this film called The Dead Don't Dance. It was about a zombie apocalypse and Indigenous zombie apocalypse. And he made it for 18,000, about 18,000, 17, 18,000. He made it on his credit cards. And I just thought, wow, that's dedication for you. You know, put himself in that much debt. And so as soon as it went to distribution, I made my university buy a copy, you know, to support him. And, you know, and then I talked about it a lot because I thought, you know, it's kind of a cool, interesting concept, and it's funny as all heck.
And yeah, we've screened Paco Watchett's films a lot. How about I realized the point I was getting to was about this idea of reductionism, you know, that goes on in not only in media representations, but does it seem like to you that there's a sense of reductionism when it comes to Native people, like Rutherford Falls and the upcoming Reservation Dogs suddenly are meant to represent all Native people in a sense, and therefore you got your shows. So what else do we need to do now? Do you get that sense of reductionism that's going on, or?
Bye, guys. See you later. Good night.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, what bugs the heck out of me is that they'll fund a non-Indigenous producer to tell one of our stories.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, there's no more money for that kind of a story because
Yeah.
it's already been told. That
Yeah.
happens like all the time. So, you know, the National Film Board too, I mean, they'll tell a story like Real Indians, and all of a sudden there's no more money to make a Indigenous history film history story,
Yeah,
because it's been done.
it's been done.
Oh yeah, that one film covered the entire history? I don't think so. You know, like, or there'll be one residential school story. Oh, that was our residential school story for the year. Or
That would be Indian Horse this year.
yeah, and it's not even an Indigenous producer. You know, or Mike Auger and Petey Chalafour, upcoming Indigenous filmmakers. They're both Cree out of Alberta. They made a story. It was a talent to watch film they made for $125,000. And, you know, how do you hire actors, go on location, pay for locations and all of those things? So here's another example of another thing I do. Because I'm the head of a film center, I own enough film equipment to shoot 2 or 3 feature films all at the same time. I own Red cameras and ARRIs and everything. I own studios. So I lent them all the equipment they needed to shoot their film. So it made the money stretch further. They could actually pay their actors a decent wage and pay their crew. They made River of Silence, and it went out, and they could not get it into a festival. It got into like 1 or 2 festivals that year. And what they consistently heard back from the festivals is, oh, we did Murdered and Missing Women last year. Oh, gee, did we solve that problem and it went away? You know, like Murdered and Missing Women still going on, man.
Yeah.
But they didn't, and then they got in a distributor, but it was a tiny little distributor. This Moving Images distribution that I'm on the board of directors for, it's a very small distribution company. And so they got in there, but I mean, it's a beautiful film that nobody saw.
Yeah.
Because of all that. So this is going back to what I started off saying, we have to get onto everything. So I'm on this little board for Moving Images distribution. I didn't necessarily want to be on Vancouver International Film Festival board, because like I need to sit on another board. I'm really tired half the time because of all of those things that I'm doing, but I have to do it because they need an Indigenous person on that board. They haven't had one. I think I'm the first one to be on. I'm definitely the first to be on Knowledge Network board. And, we have to, if you yourself can't do it, then you need to talk people around you into doing it and going and representing. Because film, and I fought a few other festivals. I wound up on funding panels where these funding bodies paid for those festivals. And I fought really hard to make sure that those festivals income, that the festivals that were not taking Indigenous films, we all know who they are. I fought hard that their amount of funding they were receiving was not increased. If anything, it was decreased, and they were given a letter to say why it was decreased, because they were not representing Indigenous film in their catalogs. So, I mean, there's a lot of things we can do. We can, and it worked with one of the festivals. I walked in the door of that festival one day and I said, what are you guys doing for Indigenous film these days? And they said that they hired an Indigenous curator.
Wow.
So they got a letter from, I sat on that panel for 3 years, that funding panel. They got the same letter for 3 years in a row. On the third year, they finally hired an Indigenous curator. You know, it takes time to make change, but you know, you can't lay down. You got to keep moving forward.
Okay, well, I'm going to do that here in Halifax.
Thank you.
So what are each of you doing in your own way to sort of move forward with this? Seems like there's this prevailing attitude that, like April said so succinctly, that we need to have permission to tell our own stories, which is some of the entanglements that the film festival itself gets into, a lot of, especially with a lot of non-native producers and a lot of non-native directors trying to get their films into our festival. I mean, is there this idea of a cultural cost that we always need to pay? Because it seems like the arenas seem to be shrinking sometimes. So what are you all doing to sort of move forward in that arena of this prevailing attitude?
I think you have to have your own film festivals. When I was working at NEPA in Hamilton a long time ago, we took a day, and this is when you could go to the National Film Board. They had their own office in Hamilton, Ontario. You could go and get films. You could pick up a projector. So at the time, the only filmmaker that I knew of was Alanis Obomsawin. So we went and we picked up all her films they had, and we had a day of Alanis Obomsawin. And it's like educating yourself, you know, seeing who's making what, seeing what they're making their films about, and just more or less just keeping informed of what's on, what's going on, and who's making stuff. And I just find it so interesting to see that, you know, like to have Alanis's films then was like magic, because nobody else was making films, native films at all. And there were documentaries about, I don't know, Nova Scotia and the fishing wars they had out there. But I think that's half of it. It's like, you know, just make your own festival, even if it's very low key. You know, you can pick up any kind of projector and a DVD player. So that's my suggestion, is just to keep on looking at what everybody's doing and appreciate the work that goes into making stuff.
That's a great idea, having your own film festival. I work for Omaha Public Schools for the Native programs. In 2015 and 16, I taught a summer film camp. All the kids got their own camera, they got access to editing software, and they all made a 5-minute short film. And then in November, we rented a theater space and they had a little film festival for them. So they all got to come and watch their movies on the big screen. And that's just passing on the knowledge and kind of inspiring the youth to go out and make their own stories, tell their own stories. So yeah, host your own film festival, definitely.
Anyone else?
To establish a bigger festival, it's really hard. We've tried that many times in BC. So we don't have a festival, an Indigenous festival in BC anymore. We had one years ago, and then it went under, and then another one kind of started up, and it only lasted a couple of years and it went under. And then they started just having exhibitions. And there's so few festivals in Vancouver that accept Indigenous work. Like there's real, And if they do, it's a certain kind only. They won't touch anything political. They just want to laugh.
Yeah.
Or cry. They just want shorts. I did this study of the Vancouver International Film Festival over a 10-year period. I collected their catalogs, and I have this table I built that shows the Indigenous films that have been in that festival that were actually directed by Indigenous people. And with the exception of Alanese Abomsawin, they never accepted feature films by Indigenous people. And then I ran into Alanese at Whistler Film Festival one year, and I asked her what her experience with that festival has been in the past. And she told me she stopped applying to them because even they stopped taking even her films. So that's why when they offered me a board seat, I took it because I thought somebody's got to straighten this out.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, because it's like the film festival that Ernest is running is really a good example of why it's important to have Native curated festivals. And it's a difference between, you know, like what white people want to see Natives make work about and what Native people want to see in the work in ourselves. And I think that's really crucial to get onto that level. And next is that distribution stuff that you talked about earlier, Ernest. The next level is that we need to curate the next filmmakers into, you know, our own networks. You know, we shouldn't be chasing all of these production places to work for some white bureaucratic system that's still controlling the financing of what's getting funded, because then it is who gets the certain you know, boarding school film, but then other parts of those things aren't told. And Indigenous people don't think in that process. And I think that's why it's really important that we take that level to the next stage. And perhaps, you know, having an online network is what our next goal really should be, to engage Indigenous filmmakers, but also the Indigenous audience that we're all craving to see each other's work where we're able to see it more frequently. Because I love going to the Native Film Festival, Video and Film Festival in Chicago. I think that's a great film festival. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to see the independent to the advanced work, but you also see what's going on in the communities, which I think it's a really breath of fresh air. When you see another film festival that just has a little category, you're not really getting that scope.
I really like that idea of not changing us to fit the festivals, but change the audience to understand and accept the stories we are telling, our authentic stories. And I think that, you know, when Atanashuat, the Fast Runner, came out years and years ago, I think that was like the example of a film coming out that had, you know, the whole cultural element to it. It was different. It's slower pace about something people hadn't seen before, Inuit culture. And people all over the world embraced it. And I think that was the really strong example that we don't have to change how we tell story. It can be our authentic way. And I think we really need to educate the public and warm up their palate to our storytelling. And I think that that's really key. Otherwise, we wind up in some really goofy sitcoms on television, and it's just our color that's being represented, not our culture.
Yeah, I'm coming off of my film Ramblin' road trip movie I made. The month of June, I had 6 festivals lined up to hear back from, and got rejections from all of them except one. Got an honorable mention from the LA Underground Film Forum. So that was really, really cool. But just dealing with rejection, and it's a little it kind of kills you inside a little bit, but I also think it builds character as well. And so I got, in the month of August, I'm looking at a couple more festivals lined up that I'm waiting to hear back from. So it's always something with these festivals going around.
Yeah. All right, we're coming up on 10 after. So what's in the future for each of you? Let our audience know what you got coming up. And I will close this out.
Hey, what do I get coming up?
So, all right, Joseph, what's coming up next for you?
I'm working on a 3 episodes of a computer animated series, all in the Cherokee language. It's set in modern time, and it's coming out very soon. I figure I'll do another video game. I did a video game last year in Cherokee, and I'll probably end up doing another one based on this animated series as well. And that's kind of what I'm up to right now. I'm doing a few animations for some documentaries, some native documentaries as well. But yeah, that's what I'm up to immediately. And then of course, the semester is starting, and I'll teach some college classes.
How about you, April?
What am I doing? I'm just currently working with our elders, doing some stories. We actually we're about 5 kilometers from where the Shubenacadie Residential School was. So there's a lot of stories that a lot of issues are coming up recently because of all the children that are being found. And they're actually looking for some of the bodies down here at our school, at the residential school.
Yeah.
So I think something's going to come out of that. And I'm just going to go with it. Whatever happens, I'll film. We'll come up with something. Whatever they lead me to do at this point. And other than that, I'm going to try to get my hockey documentary out there and shown a little bit more.
If you haven't seen the documentary, try to find it. It's a really good. It's really nicely well researched, and I like how Wayne Gretzky is in it. So
He's not in it.
just sort of given prop. Yeah. How about you, Shelley? What's next for Shelley Niro?
I'm working on 3 projects, and one of them is called Cafe Daughter, based on a play by Ken Williams. Do you know Ken Williams, Doreen? No, he's a teacher in Edmonton, but he did this play, and it's based on the senator Lillian Dick. And he gave me permission to take his play, and I'm making it into a screenplay. And it's about a young girl, and her father's Chinese and her mother is Cree. And she's growing up in the 60s, and her mother tells her, don't let anybody know that you're Indian, just keep that quiet or people are going to be terrible to you. And then her mother dies, and so she has to grow up with this on her, like, I can't let anybody know that I'm Indian. But it's her growing up, becoming a teenager, and then she eventually becomes a medical doctor. And then as her own life goes on, she becomes a senator in the government. And so that's one of the projects. But one of the other projects that I'm really excited about is called, I'm working with 3 other writers. One is Elizabeth Hill, Jordan Wheeler, and Darlene Naponce. And we've taken Pocahontas and Joseph Brand, kind of having them question, like, what happened, North America's kind of kicked them around and used their own persona to make it look like they've kind of invited them in and made it quite possible for Europeans to invade. But it's such an exciting project. It's a TV series. And so, we have discussions every week and talk about, the news that's going on and how it's going to affect our work as we continue working on this project. And yeah, so that's kind of a fun, serious, and very deep. So that keeps me going.
For you, Chris?
Well, I'm currently doing the film festival stuff with my current film, Ramblin', the feature road trip movie. I'm also working with the Joslin Art Museum on a couple of video pieces with the film crew over there. And I've got a film music video coming up soon with an artist out of Lawrence, Kansas. He reached out to me over the summer to do a video for his new album coming out. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, we screened Ramblin' in the Spring Festival, and it was very enjoyable. I really like it. So yeah,
Thank you.
there's a real spirit to it, I think. How about you, Doreen? Working?
I don't have any current films on the go, other than I'm still working on my dad's story. It's a huge story, had a huge career, and it's really difficult to kind of, at first, when I first started trying to make the film, I was trying to talk everybody into making it. Like I talked to Elenisa Bomselin, Doug Cuthan, like a whole bunch of different people, and they kept telling me I should tell it, but I kept saying, I'm new in film, I'm not experienced enough, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. But they kept putting it back on me. So as I've developed my skills, I'm getting more and more ready to probably be able to do this. So I've written a few different versions of it, and eventually I'll get there with that one. I kind of told myself after the last film, after Unseated Chiefs, I said I should make a deal with myself and say I'm not allowed to make any more films until I make that one. I'm only allowed to work on other people's films to help them. And so I have been doing that a lot, helping a lot of other people with their films, but we'll see if I can uphold that deal with myself and actually make this film. But I'm giving money away. I've got these grants to help companies enhance their digital component of their company. So we're looking at applications now. We want to be able to give that money away. We were waiting to hire our manager. He was on here a few minutes ago, Jackson Crick, and we got him hired. We just hired an assistant for him. So we're in a really good position to start reviewing the applications and giving money away. One of the proposals we're looking at is Jen Podemski's got a network going, and we're wanting to look at supporting that work she's doing. Just all the work I had just explained that I've been doing, I'm continuing that work.
Cool. Well, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time to take part in this. I think we sort of answered the questions our Native Indigenous filmmakers overlooked, and I think it's a resounding yes. Any closing comments?
Nice to sit and talk with everyone. Like, yay.
Doreen, that book behind you, Fourth World, who's that written by?
My dad, George
Okay.
Manuel. So I had it republished. This is the other thing I suppose I'm doing is I'm still on a book tour with Brotherhood to Nationhood, which is the top one here. That one was written about my dad by Peter McFarlane, and we had it republished, and it now says Peter McFarlane with Doreen Manuel because the woman's voice was missing in it, and I added the woman's voice to this version of it. And the Fourth World I had republished, and we're just working on republishing my brother's book, this purple one, Unsettling Canada, my brother Arthur Manuel. And this other book is quite interesting. This Fight or Submit is by Grand Chief Ron Derrickson. He's got a really fascinating life. He's a multi-millionaire, self-made multi-millionaire businessman. And white people hated him so much for his success, they sent assassins to kill him.
Thanks.
And he physically fought them off and shot them. They shot him, he shot them back on the front steps of his house.
Wow.
And charges were laid, and because the charges were laid, they found out who those white businessmen were. I mean, it's all in the book. It's crazy interesting.
What's the name of the book again?
It's called Fight or Submit.
Okay.
Wow. Sounds good.
Question for Chris is there a link for Rambling Around so that people can view it?
Yeah, I have a link for the trailer I can share. The movie, some festivals are hesitant on if it's screening somewhere or
Oh,
available
yeah.
somewhere, they can't accept it. So I'll put a link to the trailer in the chat here.
Cool. All right. If there's cool, everybody can grab that really quick. Like I said, there's a really nice spirit to the film. Okay. I see Native Spirits tweet chat. I've been hanging on the socials too long. Thank you again for coming. It means a lot to me to be able to try at least attempt something like this. In September, we will be doing another online panel series about the shrinking spaces in film festival arenas. And we do have Rod Pakawatchit on that panel because he is actually taking Shelley's advice and starting his own film festival, or at least he's taking part in, developing one. So that's good. And then in October, we'll be doing another one. It's called The Other 51%, which is a play on the other 99%, about Native women directors. So stay tuned for those. And we got a plethora of topics that aren't getting covered by regular panels on diversity. So we'll be announcing those as soon as we get those dates sorted. And again, all of you are invited to take part on one of those panels at least. Again, I would be happy to have you again.
One thing about panels, I attended a panel and it was out of the US and I forget who was putting the panel on, but it was on ethnic hair in the film industry. And it was all African Americans attending on the panel. And I put into the questions into the chat that there's no issue with Native American hair. Sacred. Sound went weird on here.
Oh.
Anyways, they didn't even respond to my I kept saying different things about Native American hair because all they talked about was black hair, period.
Yeah.
And I just, even on a panel that supposed to represent, and the wording of it was supposed to represent all people of color's hair. They only talked about the one. So we are underrepresented.
Yes, definitely. Well, hopefully this panel series will give, they're meant to be a space for Native filmmakers and Native industry people to have a place to talk about these things, because we know there's always pushback whenever we speak up. And hopefully that we don't get any pushback here, but I'm glad that you were all able to come out and speak on your own behalf. So once again, thank you very much. Ho-ho. And for the audience that's here, thank you for showing up. Thank you for watching these very fine people discuss the topic. And our next event is an outdoor screening here in Chicago. We've yet to set the date, but we did choose the film. It's called Inu Nikamu, about the Inu Music Festival there. And our next event after that is the continuation of the panel series, September and October. And then our main event is the Fall Film Festival, which we are now in the middle of programming, November 1st through the 10th. We'll be doing a half and half thing of some online programs, and then I think 2 or 3 in-person venues. So stay tuned for all of that. And again, thank you, Doreen. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, April. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Shelley. It means so much to me to be able to talk to you and hear your words about these topics. And thank you again for everybody for joining us. And that's going to be it. We hope to see you at the next panel discussion. And everybody have a good night. Stay safe and keep your distance.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Shelley.
Okay. Bye.
Hey, Ernest.
Hey.
How are you?
Okay, how are you? Let me
I
stop this.
didn't follow up. I'm so sorry. I